Welcome. This is Rabbi Tobin at B'nai Shalom, Monday Talmud class. It's good to have you all here. We're on 36b2 in the Schottenstein of Tractate Sanhedrin. This is chapter 4. And God willing, we're going to get to this end of this section and get on to another Mishnah. Here we are. I think we probably stopped where? On the left where it says the Gemara moves to the last section of the Mishnah?
Yes.
36b2.
Yes.
The Gemara now moves to the last section of the Mishnah. Hakol ksherin ladun dinei mamonot, all are eligible to judge monetary cases. And does anyone have the actual Mishnah in front of them? Because there's except those who. To read the end of it. Okay, I'll read it to you. Okay. The very end of the Mishnah. Hakol keshirin ladun dinei mamonot, ela kohanim leviim v'Yisraelim ha-masi'in lakahuna. All are eligible to judge monetary cases, but not all are eligible to judge capital cases. Only Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim who are eligible to marry the daughters of the Kohanim are eligible for capital cases. So this is a yichus question. It's really about your social standing and your halachic status. Who is not eligible to marry the daughters of the Kohanim? What's that? Mamzerim, basically. And perhaps gerim, converts, might also fall into this category. No negative judgment happening from this rabbi for people who are in that status, for sure. But nevertheless, that is something that pops up from time to time as far as not having a pure lineage. Judaism is not a race. Judaism is not a biological class of people, although it is inherited. So if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. So there is this inheritance quality to it. The rabbis seem to have been worried not only about the mother being Jewish, but every once in a while they talk about the sacred drop or sacred semen, that the male progenitor semen is of some high quality that engenders a Jew, which would tend towards a racial interpretation or definition of Judaism, but we know that conversion throughout the rabbinic system has always been accepted. So you should not see that as a necessary, it is not a necessary condition. In philosophical language, it is a sufficient but not necessary condition to be Jewish. It works, it makes you Jewish, it's not the only way. Okay, enough of that. So we're on 36b2, where it says, Hakol kasherin ladun dinei mamonot. All are eligible to judge monetary cases. Hakol la'atoye mai. What does the Mishnah's term all come to include? So, all, really? Could that be a non-Jew? Could that be a donkey? Could that be a dead person? Obviously, it's not all. So when you say all, what do you mean by all? Fair enough? Fair enough. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, la'atoye mamzer. Specifically to include the mamzer, who is excluded in the second half of the Mishnah teaching regarding capital cases. So a mamzer, who is evidently a Torah scholar, can be a judge in a monetary case. The Gemara questions the need for the Mishnah to teach such a ruling. Hatnina chada zimna, but we already learned this once. Kol ha'ra'ui ladun dinei nefashot, anybody qualified to judge capital cases, ra'ui ladin dinei mamonot, is qualified for monetary cases, but yesh ra'ui ladun dinei mamonot, and there is one who is qualified for money cases, ve'en ra'uin ladun dinei nefashot, and not qualified for capital cases, v'ha'avinem ba'latoi mai, and who is it that comes to include? V'amar Rabbi Yehuda latoi mamzer. Rabbi Yehuda said that it comes to teach a mamzer. In other words, we already have this other teaching that we concluded that the mamzer is only good for monetary, not capital cases. So why are you going to say this Mishnah is also teaching the same thing? Nobody's arguing with the conclusion. The question is, how many places do you need to learn that from? Now, the Gemara answer is that in reality, each Mishnah Mishnah permits a different type of person to judge monetary cases. It's not so simple as you think it is. Chada latoy ger. One comes to include a convert, the chada latoy mamzer. And the other comes to have somebody who is an illicit offspring of a forbidden union. That is a mamzer. Not necessarily a marriage or situation. It could be incest. It could be stuff. No, rape doesn't make you a mamzer. Rape doesn't make you, if it's a permitted relationship, if it had not been a crime, and if they were permitted to each other without the crime aspect, the offspring is legitimate. That doesn't make it a good thing. It's a horrible thing.
But, I'm perplexed.
You are perplexed.
Yes.
Perpetually so.
Why did the rabbis make such restrictions on who could try cases? I mean, if a guy has enough learning, okay, he has enough learning, and he happens to be a mamzer,
Yeah.
okay, what has he got, a scarlet A on his shirt
Yeah.
or something like that?
Yeah, the question is, why do the rabbis go through all the trouble to exclude somebody who might be an impeccable scholar? I don't know.
Huh?
If you've got somebody who is considered distasteful in your society, would they be the person that you put on the Supreme Court?
We've done it in this country.
Okay, but it's a discussion,
Yeah.
right? It's a discussion.
Sure.
Remember, the problem with mamzer is not created by the rabbis. It's declared, in their view, by God in the Torah. That mamzer is excluded from the community in the Torah. So the rabbis are going to take somebody who is already sidelined in the Torah and make him a leader of the people under rabbinic law. How can you have somebody whose very existence is a rebuttal of Torah law be the vocal focus of Torah law?
And yet you could have somebody that meets all the criteria.
That is a very modern view of individual worth
But
and achievement. Like the American dream is, it's a land of limitless opportunity for those who have abilities. They will be accepted and applauded for their own personal achievements.
but
You're a child of the Enlightenment.
You could take the converse of this and say that you got a guy that's not a mamzer.
Okay?
He's widely accepted by society.
He's a perfectly capable person.
We didn't say that. He's a yid. Okay? Dumb as a rock, but he's capable of
He can't be dumb as a rock and be capable of judging. We're going to see that in the next Mishnah. They have a hierarchy of intelligence and learning.
Okay.
You can't just get placed on a bed.
Okay, so now you have to be accepted by society.
You need to be qualified.
And you need to take an IQ test.
Okay. Look, let's look at it another way. Let's try, and I'm just making this up, so if it doesn't work, don't get mad at me. And don't read into this as if I have any particular modern political view. But in contemporary America, we are engaged in a sideways debate about who is welcome in our society.
Right.
Okay? We call them legal and illegal, documented and undocumented, right, citizens and non-citizens, whatever language you're going to use. There are people in this country who are born citizens regardless of their ethical, moral, or intellectual status. And there are people in this society who do not have a legal right to be here, which is unrelated as well to their moral, ethical, or intellectual abilities. Some of the rhetoric around illegal immigration has tried to match their illegal status with their undesirable moral, ethical, or intellectual abilities. The demonization of the other and the prejudice against Latinos, which we have seen in some segments of our society. Not a new story. You go back over American history in the last 150, 200, 300, 400 years, and there have regularly been groups of people who are demonized as unsuitable to the normal American ideal. Whether it's African slave trade or Chinese workers or Mexicans today. You have all kinds of history of that kind of exclusion, prejudice, and so forth. Welcome. Come in.
But this is the right of
Pass this down, please, to our guest. Okay, hang on. So the analogy that I'm drawing is the concept of, does somebody qualify to be in your society, whatever that qualification is. I'm making an analogy. So that you either qualify or don't, and it's no fault of yours, and no statement about you as a person that you happen to have won or lost the geographic womb lottery of where you were born. The mamzer has lost the womb lottery, right? The mamzer was born from a womb and a father in a way that's terribly unfortunate, but has nothing to do with that person, right? I would say that in our modern enlightened times, people also win and lose womb lotteries, and it affects their status and their welcome in life. We attribute, to wealth, intelligence. You don't think that's true? Just look at the boards of Jewish nonprofit agencies around the country, right? The wealthy people have the means to make things happen, so they're recruited and they're put on boards, and then they make all kinds of strategic decisions about what Judaism should or shouldn't do in those nonprofit organizations, and it has nothing to do with whether or not they're dumb as a post, or moral or ethical people, right? If something blows up that's really bad, then they get run out, right? But by and large, again, you have this concept that the person's birth status can dramatically affect their role in society, right? And those of you who follow the royal house, it's delightful to see what's going on with this prince and his American bride who don't want to be royal anymore, right? And they're going to try and step off, and the whole society is having this apoplectic reaction. Wait, you can't not be royal. You have to be royal. You're right. And this whole thing about birth status meaning something to society. Human nature has this. Your enlightenment, intellectual empowerment, judge a person according to their abilities, approach to things is lovely.
It doesn't work.
It's completely out of touch with the vast majority of human history.
Good.
It is also one of the great gifts of America to the world.
Right.
So we have to struggle with that. The rabbis would not have spent any time worrying about the fact that they're saying a mamzer has limits. The Torah says a mamzer has limits. So they don't have it's not their issue. It's not their issue. It's your issue. We feel sad for you.
Can you give an example of the Talmud where you have a mamzer or a ger?
Reish Lakish, who we have in this sugya, is a ger, a convert. He was a Roman centurion who converted to Judaism and became one of the great rabbis in the Talmud.
But he could not.
Are you telling me Reish Lakish never sat on a Beit Din? It makes no sense.
Okay, so we're going to have to.
But they might not have put him on a Beit Din for capital cases. I don't know. He doesn't speak here, which is very interesting because he's in Sanhedrin all over the place, but he's not talking. That's a ger. I don't have any cases of a mamzer. No, because the mamzer wouldn't have been put in that position. The Talmudic solution for the mamzer is go live in another town and don't tell them you're a mamzer. That's what the Talmud tells the mamzer. The unknown mamzer.
Back then they didn't have ancestry.com
Don't
and all
ask,
the other
don't
stuff.
tell.
Don't ask, don't tell.
So don't ask, don't tell. Go to the other town. Okay.
I always wondered where that came from. Now I know.
Now you know. Okay, so you have two different rabbinic sources for this concept of who can be on a Beit Din. We're on those photocopies. We're on 36b2. We're kind of in the middle of a topic. You're going to have to kind of roll with it a little bit to catch up to us. The topic that we're discussing is in the tractate about courts of law, and the Mishnah that we've been studying has to do with how many judges are on a case if it's about a money dispute, how many judges are on a case if it's a death penalty crime that the person is being tried for, and there's different rules assorted, for those. So like regular, you're going to sue somebody because they broke your fence is different than you're going to sue somebody because they killed your father, right? So we're talking about the judges who are on the court in those two cases. That's what the tractate is dealing with at this point. And this section is going to be over in just a another 10 or 15 minutes and we'll start a new topic so everyone will be fresh and on the same page. Okay, so there's two different sources that we said came to include the mamzer in the differentiation between capital cases and monetary cases. The solution to that is one is actually talking about a convert, one is talking about a mamzer. And tzricha. Now, do you remember the tzricha structure? All right, so there's two big structures that we have seen a couple of times in this tractate. This tractate likes the question, mina hane mile, where does the law come from, right? So a lot of our discussions have been a quote of the Mishnah, and then the challenge, like, where do they get that from? Like, I don't see that in the Torah. And the answer has to be a Torah verse of some kind, and almost universally those Torah verses are really weak proof texts. Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking me Nahani Milai. If they said it's forbidden to murder, no one's going to say Minahani Milai, because we know it's forbidden to murder. It's in the Aseret HaDibrot. It's in the Ten Commandments. So this is always in challenge to a speculative law, something that doesn't have a clear Torah verse, and lo and behold, they come up with a Torah verse that's usually not clear, and then they can argue, is it this verse or that verse, because the truth of the matter is none of those verses say that thing. And then they drop it, happy enough that they found a little peg to hang it on. The other one that we have here is called tzricha. Tzricha means it is necessary. And it really means not it is necessary, but both are necessary. Okay? Now, both are necessary goes like this. I have two sources. This pen is horrible.
You're stuck with it.
I may not be. Give me a second. Poor people online are staring at the top.
Before you came to something, so I forgot exactly what the topics were, but it came up that the Kohanes were really dumb and respected, but of course they were Kohanes.
About every 6 months, I buy a dry marker set, and they get lifted. Anybody wants to donate a dry marker set? Maybe something.
I've got boxes of them.
Yeah, bring a couple in. Okay, so tzricha is you have two, sources. You have two sources, and for one rule. But the reason you have the two sources is because there's a potential misunderstanding. So the two sources are because you have two variables. Okay? So if you had had one source, you would have thought that the first variable was a yes and the second variable was a no. If you had the second source, you would have thought the first variable was a no and the second variable was a yes. Tzricha. So the structure is always going to be the word tzricha. If you only had the first verse, how would the two variables play out? And if you only had the second source, how the two variables would play out in opposite manner. And then the concluding word of the paragraph is a repetition of the word tzricha. So tzricha, if A, then 1, 2. If B, then 2, 1. Tzricha. That's the structure. Okay? Now, why do we have structures like that in the Talmud? Why do we have a keyword like tzricha followed by a very formulaic paragraph ending in the word tzricha? This is now a style and composition of the Talmud question.
The only thing I can think of is they're trying to lock in the logic so that there is nothing to the imagination. This is it, guys.
Good. So one of the things it does is it simplifies and closes the logic loops that you could have here, the logic trees. There's only two variables, but the two variables have two potential verses. If you push this verse at the variables, it comes out this way. If you put this verse at the variables, it comes out that way. In both cases, one of your two conclusions would be wrong if you're only using one of your two sources. Therefore, you need both sources to get them both right. Notice, however, the real logical conclusion to that would be if you use both sources, you could get them both wrong. But we don't do that.
No.
You only accept the correct conclusions from the two sources, tzricha.
You need three.
The other reason is a very practical reason. Remember, this is what Talmud looks like, okay? So I'm reading down this column of Aramaic, and there's no punctuation. The only time there's, in this printed version, there's only punctuation when it quotes the Mishnah from the chapter. Nothing else has any punctuation. So we have key words that function as titles, section headings, and punctuation. So matnitin means it is taught in a baraita. So now I know when I see the word matnitin that the next words are a quote from another place. And I have to find where that quote ends, but it gives me an indication as I'm reading this column of uninterrupted Aramaic that there's some structure there. A quote is now coming, right? Tzricha is like one of the most welcome things to find when you're reading a column of Talmud and you're trying to figure out where do the sentences end and where do they begin, because tzricha is a structure. And I find the first tzricha, and before I even read it, I skim to the column until I find the second tzricha. And now I know that's where the logic tree is. And in there will be two parts. And then I find where they divide. And then I read the first section. Then I read the section. I do the logic in my own head, and I reward myself with the final tzricha, and I move on. Right? So, and this is a much more helpful way to read Talmud than how Talmud actually existed. Remember, the printing press was only invented in the 1500s. The first Talmud was only published in the early 1600s. When was Talmud written? Over a period of time from the 3rd century through the 9th century. So there's hundreds of years between the finishing of the Talmud and the first printed edition, which means all editions of the Talmud were handwritten on parchment of some kind. Parchment was rare, ink was expensive, scribes were few. So you would fit, the scribe would fit as many words as possible on the writing substrate that he had. So if he had a piece of leather this big, it's not going to be in 72 font. It's going to be in like 6-point font to get as much information on that page, because he only has so many of these pages, right? And he's going to write it by hand all the way in here. So he's not going to waste time by, changing handwriting or putting in quotes and lots of punctuation. And he's going to abbreviate words. He's going to do a lot of little, what do you call it when you do, well, not just abbreviations, but the first letter of 4 words in a row. Right, like if you, like NASA, like acronyms. The Talmud is just full of acronyms that save space, but it makes it impossible for the reader who doesn't know all the acronyms by heart to know what the heck's going on. So when you get this tractate, you get Minahane Mile, right? That question we keep having on what is this based. Now I know if I see Mem, Hey, Mem as an acronym, it's not a word. I know that that's actually Mina, Hane, Mile, right? So it just truncates it all. So the reason we have this kind of a structure is because in the writing of the Talmud, you have a compressing of the words and the information almost into code. And the vocabulary that repeats, that indicates certain logic structures, are the way that the editors separated out pieces of the argument or different types of content. So it's helpful.
When they got to the actual printing presses, Did they get rid of the acronyms?
No, they printed them because in the printing presses where you've got to put in every little piece of movable type, you would much rather put in mem, hey, mem than me, na, ha, ne, mile, right? Because you're paying people to do this. No, they kept all the acronyms.
How about when they went to the computers to do it?
The computers often now expand them. So for example, here you have written out me, na, ha, ne, mile.
Yeah.
In every single place where it's printed on the page. A bunch of those on the other side are actually the acronym in the Hebrew. So, for example, on 36b3, the next page, you see the big word Mishnah. But in the Hebrew, it's Mem, Taf, Nun, Yud, and a little abbreviation line. It doesn't spell out the whole word. It leaves off one letter. Okay? All right, so here we are. So, tzricha. Why do we have the tzricha in this case? So remember, it's going to be, we have two sources, and there's going to be two objections. Now we know the objections are ger and mamzer. So we have two sources. So it's going to say, if you only had one source, you would have gotten it right about ger, but gotten it wrong about mamzer. If you had the other source, you would have gotten it right about mamzer, but gotten it wrong about ger. Therefore, we have two sources. So let's see what it looks like in the language. Tzricha, it's necessary. The ashminan ger, because if the Mishnah taught us convert, de ra'ui levav bakahal, you would have thought, since he is fit to enter the general congregation of Jews, that he is therefore fit. Of al mamzer, who is not fit in the general congregation, you would have thought that's the reason he's not fit. Aim alo, and I would say he's not qualified to judge. Ve'i ashma'in mamzer, but if you had the one that said the mamzer was qualified to judge, you would have said deva mitipa kshera, because he came from proper semen, right? And that's the reason he can do monetary cases. Of alger deloba mitipa kshera, but a convert whose semen, his ancestral semen came from someone else, aim alo, I would say he's not qualified. And I would be wrong. Tzricha. Right? So the mamzer and the ger are both allowed into these into these monetary cases. And if I had one or the other, you could have thought, well, the reason the mamzer is because he has a Jewish parent, but I wouldn't apply that to a convert. Or you would have thought the reason the convert can is because there's no problem with him mixing in society and marrying most people's daughters, whereas the mamzer there is. So both of those would be wrong thinking, and therefore you need them both. Yes?
This was during patrilineal descent, as far as if you're Jewish or not?
No, they had matrilineal descent. Two problems. One, they're probably talking semen here, but on the other hand, they also tipa kashera and zera kashera. A kasher would be two different terms. Tipa is a drop, zera is a seed. They believed that a man had a drop and a woman had a seed. But the Torah talks about the man having seed. You don't spill his seed on the ground, that kind of thing. So they actually could be talking about either the matrilineal or the patrilineal tipa or seed. They might be using that as synonyms. You know, I mean, we know it's semen and ovum, right, or sperm and ovum. But for them, it was, you know, without the benefit of a microscope, it was seed, a general term. So they might be mixing it here. They might, you know, either one. They might have a, you know, to be a convert, it's probably male, because to be a convert, it's a Jewish father and a non-Jewish mother, right? That person would have to convert. But it could have a neither. Like a convert might not have any tipa kashera, but a mamzer always does, right? So that's their argument. I mean, it's not entirely for mixed company, right? Like you don't bring this up at the dinner table. All right, Gemara cites the last ruling in the Mishnah in order to analyze it. But not everyone is allowed to sit on a capital case. My Tama, what's the reason? Okay, so notice it's not saying minahani mile. It's not looking for a biblical source for this. I think it's given up on that. It's looking for a Tama. It's looking for a logical argument why that would be the case. Ditane Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef taught, again, in a Mishnah age teaching, Keshem shebeit din minukin b'tzedek, just as members of a court must be free of any lack of righteousness, kach minukin mikol mum. They must be free of any blemish. All right. Now, a mum is usually a physical blemish, but here somehow it's being interpreted as an ancestral or a lineage blemish. Okay, Amar Amemar, the seldom quoted Amemar says, Mikra. Well, there's a verse, right? What? So he's asking kind of he's kind of doing that. Kulach yafa rayati umum embach. You are, this is Song of Songs. Whenever you bring Song of Songs into a halakhic argument, you're skating on thin ice, because it's love poetry. It's not really halakhic argumentation. So it says, you are entirely beautiful, my friend, without any blemish in you. And I warn the people online, the battery on the laptop is about to die, and I don't have a plug today. So thank you, and we'll see you next week. We'll be picking up on Mishnah, page 36b3, the Mishnah about the seating of the Sanhedrin. So when it goes dark, I apologize. Okay. Yes, you mean Martin Luther King? Yeah, I'll teach.
Right.
I'll teach next week. Okay. Rav Yosef taught in the Baraita. Kashem shebeit din menukim b'tzedek, kach menukim mikol mum. Just as a beit din has to be free of ethical blemish, so too must be free of any other blemish. Amar Amemar, my Kra, why did Kra say this? Kulan yafar rayatim mumim bach. You're entirely beautiful, my friend, without any blemish in you. So they're using this as to talk about the beit din. Does that connect to the beit din in any way whatsoever? No, not at all. But there's a verse that says you must be entirely beautiful without any blemish, and he's applying that to beit din. V'dilma mum mamash, but maybe it's not a genealogical mum. Maybe it means you can't have a black eye or a broken leg or a big bruise. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, Amar Kra, v'hityatzvu sham imach. And when Moses had to sit with the elders according to the advice of Yitro, it says, they shall stand there with you. They shall stand there with you. Meaning, they can't have one leg broken or so forth. They have to be able to stand there with you, like you. Imach b'domim lach. Imach, with you, means with your same characteristics. Is that a strong proof text? No, that's a horrifically weak proof text. It doesn't really say what with you could possibly mean. You'll have to share. I'll make more for next time. All right, getting to the end of this section. V'dilma hata mishum shechina. Well, wait a minute. Maybe the judges with unblemished genealogical status are required only there because of the divine presence that they're going to experience. That in the presence of God, in the presence of the Shekhinah, you can't have some kind of a mum, some kind of a blemish or a deformity, or because for example, the Kohen is not allowed to have a deformity when he's performing the ritual sacrifices. So maybe in the presence of the Shekhinah, everything has to be perfect. So the Gemara is going to answer that with Ella Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, Na'a. Amar Kra v'nas uitach. And Yitro later said, they shall bear with you the burden. Itach b'domim lach le'yeheve. The term with you means they should be similar to you. But again, it doesn't mean genealogically in either of those sources either. So they're presuming the genealogical affiliation is desired, and they're reading that into the verse, and then they're using the verse to prove that the genealogical association is proven. That's called circular reasoning, right? So what is a rabbi to do with that passage? I have to form a beit din for something happening today. The beit din that I form is always a conversion, right? But it could be a divorce, right? So am I willing to have a beit din or witnesses for a ketubah or witnesses for a mikvah if I know one of them is a mamzer or I know one of them is a convert? Should I take this passage out of the Talmud and disqualify those people from signing documents or witnessing a conversion?
Coming back to whether it's monetary or election, we're talking about life or death, not for monetary. Those examples
Right.
are monetary.
Exactly. So the ger and the mamzer are allowed into the monetary case here, right? So there are, in some of the deeper, darker, more orthodox circles, there are people who say you cannot use a ger on a beit din or as a witness on a document, a convert. Why? And all they can do is cite the fact that somebody here raised it as a solvable problem. But then they would say, they solved it, but that means that it wasn't really desirable. It would be better that you didn't. If you did, it would be okay, but it would be better that you didn't. That kind of halakhic reasoning is without basis. The Talmud comes and says it's permitted. To say that everything the Talmud questions, therefore, should be avoided is to deny the fact that the Talmud and the halakhic system answered these questions, right? So to be afraid of everything that was ever asked is very reactionary. It's very limiting. It's very strict. It's well beyond the actual teaching of the Torah or the Talmud. And you can make a living doing that because you can go around saying that everything is treif and everything is forbidden unless I say so.